we speak numbers so much in our day-to-day language. It helps if you are able to, quantify a lot of the results that you have done in your past experience.
Thank you, Kelly, for joining today. Really appreciate your time. Would you tell me a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me here. I am, my name is Khalid. I'm originally from India. I did my bachelor's in electrical engineering. Post that, worked for 5 years in the e-commerce space, in retail and housing industries, primarily as a program manager and a product manager, and then moved to US to pursue my MBA from UNC Kenyon-Flagler. Absolutely loved my time over there. Had the opportunity to intern with Amazon in 2019 as a part of their retail leadership development cohort, where I worked as a senior vendor manager, essentially owning a category, the P&L of a category, and was fortunate to get a full-time role. So joined last year, July 2020, as a senior program manager in the private brand space, where essentially I was looking at the supply chain of our private brands, specifically the hardlines category. And then this year in April, I made a switch to Amazon Transportation Services, primarily because I was looking to move to Atlanta. And I found a role that really was exciting. And yeah, so currently I work as a senior program manager at Amazon Transportation Services, specifically for the fleet infrastructure team.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is something new that I ask my interviewees these days, but like, what was your first reaction when you get that offer letter or phone call? Can you just describe a little bit, just get a little bit excited before we get started with the actual questions?
Yeah, so Amazon was my dream company, like without any doubt. Like all the applications that we go through for our B schools, every single application had Amazon as my company. Yeah, so it was, and because also of my previous background working in the e-commerce space,
Yes.
it was like a pretty straightforward, transferable skill set that I could like portray. And I really still, I think like the e-commerce space, there's so much potential to grow. So that is the space that I wanted to be, and what better company to be at Amazon if you're looking to get into e-commerce. So it was absolutely amazing, right from like the internship offer, I think was like way more exciting. Because like it is just like a process of just interviewing and then you're waiting for the offer, as compared to internship, you're interacting with your manager over a time of 12 weeks, so you kind of understand what the dynamics are. You also understand how you're doing, so you have some kind of sense if things are going right or wrong. But then still like having that full-time offer was really great, and I was able to like use that and help out a lot of other students. So yeah, that was like absolutely fantastic. Like yeah, I mean it's like a dream come true for sure.
Yeah, I remember when I first got the phone call, I was like screaming with my wife, so like that's why I wanted to, ask you as well. Okay. So you mentioned something about getting into the company as an intern and then, getting the full-time job offer. Can you tell me a little bit about your process of that internship interview? Like, for example, like what happened? Like, did you get a referral? Were you just like applying through something and then like how did the interview process look like and all that?
Yeah, sure. I think like the application process changes from year to year. And my year, I don't believe there was any option of like referral, because this was a university kind of run program, a very structured retail leadership development program. So it was like a straightforward application, submit your resume, and then you have like an assessment that you go through. I think pretty much every applicant goes through that. And once you clear that, and if they find your resume really good with the right skill set, then I had 4 interviews that I went through, 1 hour each, back-to-back 4 interviews, mainly behavioral questions, trying to assess essentially the leadership principles that I have demonstrated in my past experience, a little bit of casing just to test my business acumen as well. And then, yeah, I think 3 days after my interview, I had the offer.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that casing question you got? I know that we do sometimes ask those price questions depending on who the interviewers are, but just kind of get the audience a little bit about the flavor and then what's maybe the type of question they get.
Right. So the casing is not the typical casing that you would do in a consulting interview where it's like a full-blown case.
Uh-huh.
The way I understand my interviewer was trying to test my business acumen. So
Okay.
it was like case where he himself had encountered in his
Mhm.
role, and he just kind of wanted to check my thought process on how I would look at things. So
Mhm.
it's just like a straightforward question where I gave like a 2 minute, 3 minute answer as to what are the
Yeah.
different things that I would look at and how I would prioritize of like the most important things that I would want to look at. And yeah, that's it. Like there was not much follow up specifically
Yeah.
on that. But yeah, I mean, the way we have follow up questions for the behavioral, yeah, nothing like that. So it was just like
Yeah.
just making sure that I understand business, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. No, and like I totally get that because like a lot of times the interviewers ask basically the problems they are facing and they kind of
Right.
try to ask you or people about
Yeah.
those, in like those situations and then they try to get an idea of like how you think versus like getting the actual answer. I think that's, the
Right.
thought process is still the part where I really,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, awesome. So you mentioned that you work on the Amazon Transportation Services as a senior program manager. Can
Right.
you tell me a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, so I am part of the middle mile team.
Uh,
So essentially, middle mile is right from everything in between when you take the products from the vendor and the final stage before the delivery hubs. That essentially the whole middle mile. And
uh,
my team is the infrastructure team. So we focus on deploying infrastructure at a lot of our fulfillment centers and sort centers
okay.
for various reasons. Could be to improve the safety of the
Mhm.
whole site, or could be efficiency, improving the efficiency, improving the life of all our trailers, tractors, improving the efficiency in terms of like the drivers are able to drive more on the roads. So any kind of infrastructure that would that can be helpful to
Okay.
ease their life at the same time gets beneficial to Amazon. So that is what like the kind of work that we do. And in terms of the role, it's essentially like a very typical program management sort of role where I have like a lot of stakeholders, specifically because it's like infrastructure. You have to work with your finance team, legal team, construction team, marketing team, work with leadership, get alignment on what you want to do, have your short-term goals, the long-term vision. So a lot of stakeholder alignment. So communication is like really, really key. And at the same time, because a lot of these things is something that we as Amazon do not have expertise, we work with a lot of external vendors who are experts essentially in like, construction or deploying a lot of
Yeah.
like the new technology. So you also kind of have to make sure there's an alignment between what we are aiming for and identifying the right partners, bringing them on board. So yeah, it's like a very, very typical program management sort of role is what my current role entails.
Gotcha. No, that makes total sense. Kind of piggyback on your, answer. You mentioned that you work, as a program manager and then you worked before in e-commerce space before coming into the MBA in the US. Like, were there any sort of learning curve when you joined the company? And if so, was there any sort of resources? Like, how did you, how were you able to overcome those after joining?
Right. So before MBA, I worked at Flipkart, which is like the Amazon's biggest competitor in India. So yeah, I kind of worked for our biggest competitor. So I kind of understood how the e-commerce space work,
Uh-huh.
right from how the website is set up, what goes in the supply chain in terms of
Yeah,
inventory, all those things. So it was easier for me to kind of understand at a high level. But then Amazon, the way it functions is really different from any other company. So
gotcha.
understanding the nitty-gritties of how Amazon functions, a lot of different terms, acronyms that Amazon uses in day-to-day life. So it was definitely a big, big learning curve for me.
Yeah.
But then the advantage of being part of like the retail leadership development program was that it's such a structured program. It has been there, I think, since 2008 or 2009. So I had like a lot of resources to essentially go through a structured onboarding, understand in and out of how retail functions, what are like the typical challenges that a vendor manager or an in-stock manager on a day-to-day level comes across. So that was like really, really helpful. But then when I made switch to Amazon Transportation, completely new industry, I absolutely had no clue about transportation industry at all. Specifically, like coming from India, it was like even more difficult to understand how the transportation industry works in US. So yeah, it was like a very different sort of onboarding where I had to rely a lot on my teammates, and we had like more documents. Essentially, you'd go through a lot of documents that have been written in the past, and that's like the very core focus on Amazon to make sure whatever we're doing is documented so that it can be handed over easily to any new joinee. But then in my current team, a lot of that was dependent, on me trying to like essentially interacting with my teammates and then understanding how things work. Very different from retail.
As a senior program manager, what do you like the most about your role? And then what's something that you like least about your role as well?
What have I liked most about my role? I think the team that I'm working on right now, we are working on some of very confidential projects. I always wanted to be like part of those projects. A lot of people talk about that you cannot you cannot reveal things. So I'm fortunate on some of the things that will be coming in like in 2023, 2024. Really big things where you have alignment from like the leadership as well. So that's really great to
cool.
Yeah, that's really good and fortunate to be in such a place. And in terms of like the role itself, the program manager, I think it's really important that you have the skill set of the right communication and making sure all the stakeholders are aligned. So I really like that, making sure everyone is kind of working together towards the common goal. I kind of have been always I thrive in team environment. Like I always prefer like team sports than like individual sports. So so I kind of like that part, and also the part of working backwards from a long-term vision. And then you are the one who is able to mold and influence the path that we take to reach that final goal is also like really, really like exciting, instead of just doing something that what you have been told to do. Is really exciting. Something that I do not like maybe is the fact that since I'm working as a program manager, working on like slightly longer timeline or projects that are on slightly longer timeline. So you don't necessarily see the results immediately as compared to the way you would see results working as a vendor manager or in-stock manager, where you're making like very tactical decisions on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, where it's very easy to see the results. But as a program manager, you need to be a little more patient.
So my last question for you is advice for those who want to join Amazon as a program manager.
I think the two important things that I would suggest is, since the process of Amazon is like pretty straightforward, I believe, is you put in your resume. If you get a referral, I think it helps. But like even without a referral, your resume is the most important piece that is essentially viewed by a lot of the hiring managers or even HRs before they decide to interview a candidate. So making sure your resume is crisp. And again, this is from my experience. I have no like data behind this, but I believe like at Amazon itself, we speak numbers so much in our day-to-day language. It helps if you are able to quantify a lot of the results that you have done in your past experience and put that on paper, because it essentially is kind of way that you're speaking an Amazonian's language, where you're quantifying all the results. It becomes way more easier to digest like the kind of project, like how big or small of a project that you have done. So making sure you have like a very crisp resume, I think, is really, really important to improve your chances of getting invited for an interview. And then the second phase is the interview. yeah, there is the assessment piece as well before the interview.
Yeah.
In assessment piece, I believe is more to check your personality and to some extent your business acumen as well. In terms of personality, I would say a lot of the personality that we would that Amazon wants to see in its employees is very, very clearly demonstrated to a lot of the leadership principles. So having that as a reference when you're going through that assessment is like really, really important. Of course, be yourself as well. Like, I mean, don't try to put an answer that
else. Yeah.
that doesn't help in long term.
Yeah.
But going through those leadership principles is definitely really important and helpful. And then the final part, behavioral questions, is essentially again on leadership principles, where the interviewers are trying to understand how you have demonstrated these leadership principles in your past experience, because that is what we are going to say that's the indication that similar kind of work experience or similar leadership principles is what you will demonstrate when you join Amazon. So a lot of your stories try to focus around the leadership principles. And I believe depending on like, no, I guess it's applicable for all the roles. Communication, I think, is like really, really key because when you join in Amazon, you are communicating not just to like your level, you might find yourself communicating so many times to the leadership. So it's really, really important that you are like crisp in the communication, because leadership will give you like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe, and not wait for you to like explain them like completely. So making sure that you are good at your communication also helps, I believe, when you are going through the interview process.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Hey, I think those are all my questions for today. Thank you so much for joining in, giving us your, sharing us your experience.
Yep, awesome. Thanks for having me on. This was great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Khalid.